Hello, everyone. I'm Abid Hassan, Senior Assistant Editor with ETHR World, and a very warm welcome to all of you to the second edition of ET BFSI Virtual Summit. And our theme for this edition is the adventurous age of new normal. I have with me senior industry leaders from the BFSI industry, and we are going to discuss on the topic skilling up the employees and building the companies of the future. Learn, unlearn, and relearn is the mantra to rise and scale up continuously. The BFSI sector is one of the sector which is fastest when it comes to adopting new-age technologies, and so the workforce has to be ready to embrace it. How are BFSI companies enabling and reskilling and upskilling their employees? What skills are the most in demand? How can the workforce from a non-STEM background take up reskilling? And to answer all these questions, I'm privileged to have all these eminent panelists with us. Let's welcome Mr. R. Venkatesh, President and Head of Operations, Technology and HR, DCB Bank. Please welcome in joining Shanta Valluri Gandhi, Head HR, CSR and International Branding, RBL Bank. Welcome, Shanta.
Thank you, Abid. This is a great opportunity for me as well. Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks a lot. Mr. Vibhash Nayak, Head HR, Learning and Development and Admin, HDFC Life is my next guest. Welcome, Vibhash.
Thanks, Abid, and thank you for inviting me as well.
Thanks a lot. Please welcome me in joining Mr. Tarun Katyal, CHRO, Max Bupa Health Insurance. Welcome, Mr. Katyal. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much. My privilege to join today's conference.
Thanks, Mr. Katyal. Thank you. So it's a pleasure to have all of you. Without any further ado, let me jump onto my first question, and that is for Mr. Venkatesh. So, Mr. Venkatesh, talking about business models and market expectations, what steps are you taking to foster a culture of innovation and transformation in your organization? If you would like to share something.
Yeah, I think this is last year, if there is anything that people would want to talk about, is how people have actually embarked on the whole concept of innovation, given what people had to do in a COVID kind of an environment. Particularly, what I see is while every organization is stepping up the digital initiative, what is very, very critical from a customer journey perspective is to make sure that there are no disruption. So to that extent, what the companies or the organization, they have to ensure is that while you create digital journey, you create new products, but don't impact the service part or a break in service, because that is going to be the hallmark as we see. Like, just as an example, you order something online and you have a disruption. If that doesn't reach that product or fulfillment doesn't happen on time, that is going to be a very, very great disruptor. So organizations have to work together in making sure that the service takes the priority rather than just the product per se. And I think that is going to be the game changer for days to come.
Okay, so very valid point. I think service should be the priority. That's what you believe, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Coming to Shanta, and I would like to ask about employees and innovation. Shanta, how do you encourage employees to think out of the box and innovate processes and tools? What are your thoughts?
So first and foremost, let me tell you, Abid, that, the last 1.5 years, I think digital acceptance, both at employee and just like Venki articulated for customer, has become the need of the hour. It has become the most important tool for us to even get going. So let me give you an example. When COVID happened in 2020, all we knew is that we had to give them access and create an environment of work from home as a starting point. I mean, just imagine an organization where 100% of the workforce were working from office suddenly had become a work from home. So the basic thing was to get a laptop, a VPN access, and basic stuff to an employee. Is that something that I had to teach an employee how to use it? It was understood that the employee has to adapt to it. So there was remote management of training those people who couldn't handle this. The second big thing that happened was there are certain jobs in this period that we realized you can actually work from home. And therefore, we had to intermingle what we call the productivity tool. For those jobs which are very monotonous in nature, you can actually work from any remote workforce environment, which includes your home. So implementing a productivity tool, training our employees to use that productivity tool became the need of the hour. The third thing is, if you look at your HRMS process, what is it that is most frequented in an HRMS? There's learning and there is your attendance and payroll. So the third thing was, how do we make a simple app for the employees to accept it so that wherever they are, they're able to access information on what's happening in the organization for those who don't come in, so that their payroll and their attendance and everything is well managed. The last but not the least is the fact that an employee needs to be engaged. Digitization to some extent makes you feel a little distant in your whole process. So the team engagements, the team management, I think that became the biggest change culture which we had to implement. And the fifth is the wellness piece. Fortunately for us, we've been able to bring about digitization from a service to employee across all these 5 pillars, Abid. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, definitely. And I'm glad that you pointed out the wellness piece, because it has become very important, not only for the employees, but also for the leaders. And in the last 1.5 years, apart from skilling, wellness is also one of the most prominent thing that companies are looking at. So coming to Vibhash now, Vibhash, we spoke about employees. I'll also ask you about employees, but there's a certain twist to it. How are you preparing your customer-facing employees to overcome the market complexity and succeed?
Okay, a good question. All of us are living in a very VUCA world. VUCA world is something that we've been talking about for a very long time. And I think last year has just told us in terms of how volatile and dynamic the world can be. Okay, and especially for people who are customer facing, and in our case, they would be mostly, people at the branches or your sales guys who are going and meeting customers. If they need to adapt to this volatile world, there are 2 things which are absolutely important. One is keeping themselves updated with knowledge and skills, right? If I was to look at the kind of people who've been able to adapt and succeed, they are the people who constantly unlearn, learn, and relearn. Or it's equally important for you to kind of shed your baggage, unlearn a few things, and then pick up some new skills. Right. And so what is most important is, how do you create a learning ecosystem within your organization, which can help people adapt to newer way of doing things? How can they keep themselves current? And if they have the knowledge and skills, then it gives them a lot of confidence to kind of, deal with this volatility, deal with the complexity which kind of exists in the world. Now, in our ecosystem, we have multiple elements that people can dip into, whether it's, instructor-led training, mobile-based learning. We've gamified a set of things, different things for different people. I think the key to dealing with complexity is keeping yourself updated and improving your knowledge and skills.
Okay. So the key point here is keeping yourself updated.
Absolutely.
Okay, great point.
Keeping yourself updated, I think unlearn and relearn, both are equally important. It's equally important for you to unlearn a few things as well.
Exactly. If you will unlearn, then you can get some more new things and go forward. That's the whole idea, right?
That's right.
Okay. My next question is for Mr. Katyal. What is the role that functional subject matter expert can play in the insurance transformation journey? And what skill sets do they need to develop to stay relevant? What are your thoughts, Mr. Katyal?
So first of all, we are from insurance, so I will answer for my industry. So health insurance, one, it is essential service. So there is a slight difference from other services than from an essential service. So we also landed exactly in the same situation as Shanta, Vibhash, and Venki very beautifully put. Especially the word VUCA world we used to hear a lot of times, but we never thought that we will have to somehow land in a situation which actually is a VUCA environment. It happened, and when it happened, the first thing we realized was that we did not have anything which was supporting work from home, naturally, because as an organization we were always promoting people to come and work in office. So being a sales organization, so the thought with the leaders was that if people are going to marketplace and if people are coming to office, only then the organization can run. So nevertheless, there were some, policies here and there allowing people, especially with maternity or some other special conditions, to take time off and work from home in a limited way, which was not clearly written down as a policy, but there were practices around. But suddenly we found ourselves in a situation where there was no other way around, actually. So we had to adapt very quickly into this mode. But what helped us was, we rallied the people, especially the business leaders. So when they connected with employees, the best rally which we could do with our people was that we are a company who has to serve a cause. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because being in health insurance, now this is a time when customers expect that, hey, I bought this product many years back, I never utilized. But now is the time when I should feel secure, I should feel confident that if I need, I will get company support. So that's where we started off actually. That if we have one thing which can connect us and which can help us do something which will remain etched in customers' memories forever, it is to serve the cause. And the cause is very simple, that you have to serve your customers in these difficult times with the same SLAs which we have been promising as a brand. Yeah. So the SLA, for example, for a customer, the SLA which we promote is 30. Within 30 minutes, you will get your pre-auth clearance from us. And then similarly, if you're getting released from hospital, then within 90 days, if everything comes to us, you get approval from our side, and your claims, your everything is processed in a fair and just manner. So now to deliver on this promise, and if you deliver this promise in these times, then these customers will never forget you. That was something which we started off. But how do we make this happen in this current scheme of things, where everything is unknown, everything is uncertain, we have never worked like this, etc., etc. So that is where the cultural change, as rightly mentioned by Shanta also in her address, that it was more to do with culture. That once leaders start talking a language where the first impression they are giving to employees is that this is something which is completely to do with human life, no matter junior, senior, etc. So first and foremost, you have to protect yourself. So if you are my team member, so first and foremost, you have to protect yourself, your family. Then we have this ask. So what we said was, okay, we will compromise on sales, because sales is something which we will not risk our lives at, but we'll make sure that we come out with a model where we are able to service our customers. So that's a mandate which we started with, and we build all these parameters in our last year, organization performance metric. We did a lot of changes there, which we call as measure of success for the organization, which gets further populated in your bonuses, your feedback, etc., etc. So all those metrics which relate to these challenges as leadership team, especially, were identified. And especially one metric I will call out here. We introduced a new metric, which was called digital index. So we said that as leadership, if we want to make a difference, the only way to do it is to move multifold on the digital side in all the functions. It cannot happen that HR does something on HRMS and business does something. So it has to happen on an organization front. So there was a complete charter of activities which was prepared. Okay, this is the digital index needle which we have to move from starting point of 0 to 30, let's say. And then in this index, these are the things which have to move on the customer side. These are the things which have to move on the employee side. And these are the things which have to move on the internal processes side. So that as an organization, when we talk to our employees, when we talk to customers, we look like that we have, moved on from a pure, paper-driven, traditional insurance organization to a digital organization. So I think these two things, one is culture connect, starting from linkage to cause and purpose. And second is realigning our performance priorities and balancing the communication and actions on ground, including policies, were, made in a way that it sought to balance your, safety and security along with work. Where in all forums, from MD, from shareholders, from Bupa, everywhere, the message is very simple, that first of all, you have to protect yourself, because if you stay healthy, then everything else can happen. So from there, then everything got kicked off, developed, and we are proud to say that with respect to all these metrics, we have moved uh, quite appreciably in the last 1 year, and we have set new goals, assuming that current year also will continue to be similar to last year. Now we have our learning experiences in front of us, or maybe it is even more difficult than last year actually. So that's how we have across our priorities.
Great, Mr. Katyal. You summed up really well. But I really like the point when you said, I'll keep a note that if you stay healthy, everything can happen. So that's the key takeaway from this conversation for me. And coming back to Mr. Venkatesh and the most important topic, which is upskilling and reskilling the workforce. I would like to ask you, what is your top challenge in terms of upskilling your workforce? Like, how are you overcoming that?
This is indeed the most important question in terms of, how do you keep your people agile? And to different people, it could actually have a different meaning. The other word that I would like to talk about, which is also very relevant, is to develop a kind of a resilience in people. And with the kind of mix that we have today, I come from a banking industry, so you have at least 3-4 types of generations who are actually working together. So different people have different meaning. You need a workforce which is agile, which means that they need to be multi-skilling. They need to be, able to absorb different kind of pressures that are there, whether it is due to COVID or in future any other pandemic that would come in. So net, what really worked in the last 1 year, and I'm sure this is true for my other co-panelists as well, is that people who are ready to do different jobs. I mean, there were obviously challenges in terms of, you didn't want to, terminate anybody's employment, but you really wanted, how do you redeploy the existing talent into other opportunities, etc. And that is where an employee who was ready to go to another job, which is, let's say, was doing a sales job, but was ready to do a back office job, or a back office person wanting to do a sales job, became really handy. And we did some of those things where we moved people from one function to another. So I think the core part would be developing a workforce to be an agile workforce. That is one of the biggest challenge. How do you deal with that? And I think that is something I just want to touch upon in about 30 seconds, is that uncertainty is going to be there. So tolerance as a competency, developing tolerance for ambiguity and complexity is something that many organizations, or us as an organization, we are focusing, because we may develop somebody for a skill today, but that skill may be irrelevant tomorrow. And I think where the change needs to come in is a mindset that I am ready to embrace a new skill or a new technology or a new way of doing. If we are able to develop, we are actually creating a workforce for tomorrow, and that would be more ready.
So the whole idea is to not learn something which is relevant for now, but something which is relevant for the future as well. So keep learning. That's the whole idea from your side, right?
Keep learning and learning new skills. And something Vivas also mentioned about the fact that unlearning part is far more important than the learning, because that's where you are open to learning new skills and also doing new functions, because what you are learning for today, that might just be redundant tomorrow, given the fast pace of change that is taking place.
Okay. Great. Mr. Katyal, you mentioned about how you navigated through the entire journey of this pandemic, 1.5 year, and what were your priorities. I would like to ask you one thing about going forward. How do you see jobs in this sector evolving, and what would be your advice to young talent who are entering this insurance industry?
Sure. So as far as health insurance is concerned, so I would say, because of this pandemic, there is more awareness which is getting generated, and the industry is on a roll. So, of course, now we have to cater to this growing need of people coming to us for more products, more choices, and availability in more locations. So everything is coming across. So earlier, that there was limited awareness, and people used to think that if I have company's insurance, it is good enough. Now people are thinking differently. People are thinking that company's insurance is fine, but do I have something which is my own? So tomorrow, in these uncertain times, even if I lose my job, so first thing I have to have is a health insurance. Yeah. And then when youngsters start thinking like this, or the any other category starts thinking like this, the product requirement also changes. So youngsters, need something different in the products on offer in terms of what is the if they are not actually claiming all this what they are paying. So can they get something additional rather than just something where they are spending only? So like that, all these changes are so. One is that growth and expansion is happening in our industry, which means there will be large scale requirement of people in sales function per se. So when I sales, it cuts across frontline sales majorly. Then you will have relationship managers and branch managers, etc. So all these positions accordingly get opened up when you expand to different locations or you acquire new relationships, etc. Second, I think as an organization, we also and a lot of other companies are thinking of expanding its horizon on digital sales side. So where earlier people used to think that if we have traditional channels like agency, bank assurance, etc., so we'll get all the requirements of customers met from those channels. But now with more younger population getting added into this category, so they want to buy things on their own, which means you have to have extremely good architecture available with you for the purpose of serving these online sales needs, which is equivalent to any world class your Amazon or I won't say going to that level, but something similar to that level needs to be created so that people who come and visit your site for purchases, etc., it's a seamless experience and it's a world class experience delivered to them end to end. So which means that other than sales, other skills which will be in demand will be, of course, technology. So technology people will be in demand for people who can code, who can develop, developers who can quickly turn around these requirements and put everything into the system for online application sorts, and then converting the entire customer journey online. So all these tech developers, I think, will be in very high demand. You will also see a lot of product people required for insurance sector. As far as health is concerned, I can take this thing that people who can provide innovative products which can cater to various demographics of population, including millennials, including housewives or senior citizens, etc. So all those product specialists will be required, and they need not be necessarily from insurance background only. They can come from any background because this is a skill which can be picked up. Then on functions like actuarial, which is again a technical function which will be in high demand because of current situation of pandemic. Because this particular skill helps you to project that what kind of claims you are going to incur over a year and what kind of model you should run to at least project, even if you are making losses which are quite higher than normal times. So these are the people who project you with such models. So these people will be in high demand, and these people also then help you to cater to regulatory requirement of getting your all modeling or annual operating plan modeling, and then other technical parameters cleared from regulator. So there will also be therefore demand for other functions, which involve back-end support, like customer service will be in demand. Then you will have, of course, some demand in marketing, HR, etc. So this particular industry looks to be on a growth path for next at least 4 to 5 years. That's what we can see.
So you are expecting a robust demand in this industry, in this sector, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And this demand, irrespective of the pandemic, I don't have any visibility. I don't think anybody has any visibility. But we expect that this demand, irrespective of pandemic, is going to be there for at least next 4 to 5 years.
Okay. Great.
So it's a change in mindset.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. You pointed out all these. Shanta, from your side, would you like to add anything about the job in demands for the banking industry, from the banking industry point of view? Would you like to say something?
So, Abid, I don't think anything is majorly changing. Okay, so just recognize the fact that expansion of branches is going to happen. Okay, so there is going to be those brick and mortar structures, because even today, a customer would like to come into a brick and mortar environment. It's not going to be 100% digital. So we will expand our branches. So we will need manpower for our branches, which is a combination of ops, service, branch management. I don't think we're running away from that. So that's a big investment of people. The second investment on people is in your risk control and credit. Please understand that the market is undergoing a lot of changes. You also know in cybersecurity, risks in cybersecurity have changed. There are areas of risk, not just business risk, but there's technology risk. There is people risk, because we are all going into a digital world from a physical world. Okay, so there are different kinds of risks which are coming up. So there will be a lot of engagement, a lot of hiring in the risk vertical. We are in the business of lending. And you understand that the markets today, there are a lot of people who've lost jobs. There are moratoriums that are being given. So there is going to be an investment in the credit side of the portfolio for sure. And therefore, we will hire a lot of people in the control and credit side. We will continue to hire people in the regulatory space of business, because regulations also are getting stricter with the year-on-year passing by. Most importantly, there will be investments in important roles, which is customer service. Today's service to customer, which even Venkatesh alluded to, is an important milestone for us to cross over. So there will be digital servicing as well as physical servicing. So that's an investment that we will make. We will continue to employ people in sales and service. We will continue to employ people in operations. But what I would like to also go back a little bit is to what Venkatesh said. See, one of the things that remote workforce has done is that people's job enlargement is what we'd like to invest on. So today, if you look at what I'm really driving, so till very long ago, we were driving, leading self, leading team, and leading business. These were our three legs of where we used to do developments. But today, we moved to what we used to drive till last year was 1:1. That means for every one person, they will get one training which helps them to develop themselves in their existing job. Now we move to what we like to call 1:1:1. That means not only do you have to develop a training which is for your job today, but also be ready for taking on another job, and therefore you'll be trained on that as well. So what we are seeing is it's not just about hiring people from outside. It's a very important element is how are we upskilling people who are already with us. Let's assume your example, Abid. You're Delhi based, okay, for your job, but your personal level, you're probably Jharkhand based. I'm just taking your example for simplicity of execution. Suppose there is one gentleman who has a similar thing in branch banking today. I would rather upskill him for a role which is more relevant in Jharkhand rather than making him relevant for Delhi for today. So therefore, our investment strategy on learning and upskilling is also for our existing resources. Now, what does that do? That helps us hire more people to replace those jobs, which today they probably moved homes, and hire for many, many jobs. So business in banking, like, Venki already alluded that we did not terminate or downsize or anything people. If you look at all of us, we upskilled them, we retained them, we actually helped them through the crisis, and we have only grown. We put up so many branches and so much of hiring we've done. Nothing has changed. Honestly speaking, this nothing has changed. We will continue to hire in every angle, and I like to, obviously echo, Tarun's words as well, where he mentioned about, this marketing, HR, service, product, etc., where we will continue to invest. I don't see any major hiring stopping in any of these areas. Strengthening, yes.
Okay,
Sure.
I have an additional question, and that is for Venkatesh. When Shanta mentioned that we'll be opening more and more brick and mortar branches, there are large number of people working in the metro cities, coming back to their native places and working from there. Remote working is the new culture. I think it will stay for a while. Do you think there is more and more job openings in the tier 2, tier 3 cities in the banking sector by any chance?
Abid, if you look at it from a regulator's perspective itself, and if I just take the branch footprint as an example, the regulator has a very clear guideline in terms of number of branches that you open in a metro, what would be the ratio that you need to do it in urban or semi-urban or unbanked areas. So to that extent, a few percentage of the branches, let's say you open 100 branches, you are by design required to open X percentage of branches in the rural areas or in tier 2 to tier 6 cities. We as a bank, our focus is actually to open branches in tier 2 to tier 6 cities, because that is where we do believe that the next set of growth is likely to happen, because where in metro cities there could be an oversaturation or overbanked kind of a situation. So I do believe that there would be more jobs that would be created in these cities. And you will also see that some of these smaller cities or some of the smaller towns will also go through a bit of a transformation in terms of an urbanization, and some of the rural population is also like to move to these cities. So some of these cities which are smaller today would actually grow to become little larger than what they have been. And I really see that much of the growth is likely to come from these cities for sure. And then job creation would obviously be the inevitable thing to happen there.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Venkatesh. I think we spoke a lot about jobs. We got diverted from the skilling topic that we were discussing. So I'll come back to Vibhash, and I have a very simple question for you. How do you ensure your L&D strategies align to the overall business objectives?
Okay, so Amit, as far as we are concerned, as far as my L&D team is concerned, there are two objectives that I have for them. 50% of their KPIs are linked to business KPIs. So if you're basically training a set of resources, and I'm just taking an example of sales, for example, they have to be joined at the hip. Just doing training programs and covering more number of people cannot be the KPI. At the end of the day, it should lead to increase in productivity. So they have joint KPIs. We've got joint business KPIs, and it should make a meaningful difference to the productivity of the individual. And that's something that we do. The other thing is, the team is expected to come up with innovative ways of trying to increase and make the learning ecosystem that much more robust. And over the years, I think because we've had that KPI, we've added multiple things to the learning ecosystem. Okay, and I'll tell you what the challenge was. And Venkatesh spoke about one challenge. I think one of the challenges that we faced as a company was most of our learning resources were diverted only for our hypo population. So you have only so much money and so much resources, right? So you end up basically coming up with a set of interventions or programs which are necessarily for probably 15% of the population who are your high performing, high potential. But what happens to the rest 65-75% population who are average guys? And how do you basically cover them? I think Shanta mentioned about 1:1, 1:1. But you have limited resources, and how do you make that possible? While I think we may want to kind of train every individual, because of the limited resources that you have, it becomes a challenge. And there are various innovative ways in which you can touch people. It need not always be sending them to an ISB or to some IIM for a training program. There are multiple ways of trying to kind of touch people and improve their knowledge and skill levels. So one of the KPIs was, how do you basically come up with these innovative ways? And over the last 3-4 years, we've been able to kind of come up with multiple things which help us cover now almost 90% of our people. So largely, I think aligning the KPIs of your training team to the business KPIs is something which is extremely important, because then you start thinking backwards, and it's not just about training hours and training days that you want to kind of cover, but make a meaningful difference to the business per se.
So you mentioned about the business per se. I have one question. I think anyone would like to answer that because this will be my last question. We are running out of time now. You mentioned about the business per se. the business case of upskilling the workforce, how do you create value from these initiatives? Create value back from these initiatives, actually.
So, let me try this, because I'll tell you, on learning and development for banking specifically, we have different grade system, right? Everybody has. So we have an upper bunch of people, which sometimes you call them as hypo. There could be average performers even there. When you look at business and succession planning, there is a developmental need that we indulge in. Then there are people at the lowest levels who probably are first-time managers. Okay, now what we have done is we've taken the training need analysis entirely from business. So like Vibhash mentioned, yes, we are at the hip. Okay, we are completely at the hip. But let's understand, if you're doing a retail training, if you're doing something for branch banking and you're doing something for retail lending, you can't be very far away from both the businesses. There are certain prerequisites of a retail team manager. He needs to be compassionate. He needs to manage a large team. He has to be productive. I mean, I don't think that's a no-brainer. If you're not productive, you can't be where you are. So productivity is a given metric. Where is it that we feel challenged about is how do you develop this guy to become aspirational for a retention and for career? So there are one or two things which we have done, and we've done pretty well, is we have moved most people to become, those who are practitioners, to become trainers. And I'm not talking about just the internal trainers. I'm talking about people who probably are practitioners of large banks or large organizations who actually have invested with us. And these are not spray and pray activities. We've been doing this for 4 to 5 years. So we have a leadership academy of practitioners who actually come and show really how you can succeed. Because training by just mere textbook training sometimes doesn't give you the desired outcome. So there is something called a first-time manager where we invest in a particular kind of training. We have a middle-level manager where we will come in, and all these are joined by business. Unlike insurance, if I may have the liberty, Vibhash, to say it, the trainers are almost placed inside the business units, right? In their models. In our models, we don't place our people necessarily inside the businesses, but therefore we are joined at the hip, because without knowing the need analysis. So recently we launched something called subscription. Okay, sometimes what happens is you just believe that all these people need this training, and you go and do these, national level training programs. And then you realize that the guy is not interested. He's come there because his boss asked him to come and attend that. So what we did is we created a subscription-based training program. You don't have to pay for it, but at least show the interest to subscribe to it, because we're getting practitioners. The second thing about getting practitioners is today we are able to do recorded training and development, which we couldn't do in the past. So I think this pandemic has also given us various opportunities of relooking how we can upskill. And I sincerely urge you to do a proper session on upskilling, because I think we've digressed a little bit to jobs and job markets and things like that. I assumed it was upskilling, and I think there'll be fantastic ideas which we can learn from insurance as well as great opportunities, Abid.
Yes,
Abid, would I have 30 seconds? I want to just...
Yeah, definitely. I would like to ask, anyone would like to comment on the same question? Like, we have 30 seconds each, Venkatesh and Vibhash.
Yeah, so, you talked about the value creation, and I think the hallmark for any value creation is when you are able to show actual value. And I would just want to give an example rather than, the whole training initiative per se, that we have a program that is called lead generation. Through this program, what the HR trainers would do, they will work with the businesses and the employees obviously chosen by them. And then the trainers and the participants of this program, they take a goal that they would actually develop business out of that workshop. And the trainer will work through end to end. And such an initiative that we have been rolling this for about 3 years. Every year, HR trainers would take a target as a whole, and both business and HR will actually accomplish that. The target actually sits on the HR trainers goal sheet. And when they are able to accomplish it, that's where we are able to show value that, through upskilling, how are you creating value, and how are you making yourself successful and more productive and performance oriented?
Anything from you?
Yeah, Abid, I think just I'll take very little time. I do agree with Shanta. I think there is opportunity in a crisis, and COVID really was a great opportunity for us to reimagine and rethink the whole upskilling and the training piece. Training was equal to classroom training. Classroom training, mobile training, virtual training, democratizing training by kind of having practitioners from within the company itself doing smart talks or or TED talk kind of stuff, having debates on topics and people subscribing to it, or even things like we curated a set of courses. People could subscribe, earn points or earn credits, and these credits would then get linked to your career growth, reward, recognition. What has happened is the entire thing has exploded. Okay, and it exploded just because of the virtual way of doing things. Earlier, you would always think of a classroom training, and that was the training maybe a couple of years back. But I think that entire ecosystem has undergone a change. In fact, the best thing that has happened to the L&D space is COVID, I feel, because I think there are too many things that we are doing currently which wouldn't have been possible in the earlier era. So thanks to COVID, and thanks for helping us or making us reimagine things.
My only last point is, in our growing up years, Vibhash is much younger. So in our growing up years, we use training and development as opportunities to network.
That's right.
Okay, because in our career graph, it was important to know your peers across the country. I think we see that as the missing link in today's COVID era. Otherwise, it's been the best opportunity for anybody. And like he said, it's such a fabulous opportunity for our own SME experts, practitioners to come and talk about it. The only piece is networking, where I think we are missing a little bit of that in this virtual world.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts. It was really wonderful hosting all of you. I think companies are redesigning their digital strategy and strengthening their investment in technology and upskilling their people to drive business growth. I personally think upskilling, unlearning, and relearning are the key takeaways from this session. Thanks a lot.